One of this cast's most beloved stars was declared dead by his own management team a full day before he actually died. His family had to correct the news of his own passing while he was still alive to hear about it. We'll tell you exactly what happened and how he spent those final hours later in this vid. Because the story of the Cleaver family didn't end when the cameras stopped rolling in 1963. For some of them, it was just getting started. Here's who's still with us in 2026 and who we lost along the way. Jerry Mathers. Let's start with the reason any of us are here. Jerry Mathers played Theodore Beaver Cleaver, the wide-eyed kid who could turn a Saturday chore into a full-blown crisis. Remember him hiding a baby alligator in the toilet tank? That was Beaver's whole charm. Not naughty, just hopelessly curious. Here's something a lot of fans don't know. Mathers was famously almost late to his own audition because he was more interested in staying at a Cub Scout meeting, and producers loved his honesty so much they cast him on the spot. He appeared in all 234 episodes and became one of the first child actors ever guaranteed a cut of a show's merchandising revenue. Now 78 years old, Mathers is still very much alive, still doing conventions and interviews, and as recently as 2025, he was reuniting with surviving castmates for fan events. He's outlived nearly his entire TV family. And as we'll see, that's not a small thing. Hugh Beaumont played Ward Cleaver, the eternally patient dad with the cardigan and the life lesson always ready. What most fans never realized is that off-screen, Beaumont was an ordained Methodist minister, a real one, with a Master of Theology degree, who sometimes struggled with the tension between playing tough guy detectives in film noir and preaching on Sundays. Barbara Billingsley later admitted she and Beaumont didn't hit it off right away. He reportedly called her a Pollyanna, which apparently annoyed her, before they became close, lasting friends. Before Ward Cleaver ever existed, Beaumont built a whole other career playing the hard-drinking private eye Michael Shane in a string of 1940s crime films, a role about as far from Ward's calm parenting as you can get. He was also a conscientious objector during World War II, serving as a medic instead of picking up a weapon, a detail that quietly lines up with the gentle, non-confrontational father he'd later become famous for playing. Beaumont suffered a stroke in 1970 that left him with partial facial paralysis, forcing him to step back from acting and eventually retire from the business entirely by 1972. He died of a heart attack in 1982 in Munich, Germany, while visiting his son at age 72. He never got to reprise Ward Cleaver in the 1980s reunion projects, but the show dedicated the sequel movie to his memory. Veronica Cartwright. Now here's a curveball. Veronica Cartwright played Violet Rutherford, Lumpy's little sister and the girl who gave Beaver his first kiss, and in one memorable episode punched him in the face after he laughed at a prank sign. It's a tiny role in the grand scheme of Leave It to Beaver. But stick with this one, because Cartwright's next chapter is genuinely wild. She went on to star in Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, then in 1979's Alien, and here's the part fans still bring up. She originally auditioned for the lead role of Ellen Ripley. The studio switched her into the smaller role of Lambert just before filming began, and gave Ripley to a then-unknown Sigourney Weaver, launching one of the biggest careers in movie history instead of Cartwright's. Born in Bristol, England, Cartwright is actually the older sister of fellow child star Angela Cartwright. The two lived next door to each other for 13 years and remain close today. She also appeared in the 1978 remake of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, delivering one of that film's most infamous, unsettling final scene reactions. She kept working anyway, racking up 3 Emmy nominations across decades of film and television, including guest roles on shows like The X-Files, and 6 Feet Under. Now in her late 70s, Cartwright is reportedly still active in the industry today. Barbara Billingsley was June Cleaver, Pearls, Heels, and Endless Patience, the mother every 1950s sitcom family measured itself against. She almost turned the role down entirely, unsure it would go anywhere. Here's a fact that still makes people do a double take. Decades later, Billingsley played the Jive Lady in the 1980 comedy Airplane, fluently translating slang for 2 passengers, a joke that only worked because audiences already knew her as the impossibly proper June Cleaver. Born December 22, 1915, Billingsley had actually been acting for over a decade before Beaver ever came along, including recurring roles in the sitcoms Professional Father and The Brothers in the mid-1950s. She later lent her voice to the character of Nanny in the animated series Muppet Babies, introducing her to a whole new generation of kids who'd never seen the original show. She reprised June for the 1983 TV movie and the 1980s revival series, staying close with Mathers and Dow for the rest of her life. Billingsley battled a rheumatoid condition called polymyalgia rheumatica in her later years, and passed away at her Santa Monica home on October 16, 2010, at age 94. Tony Dow, her TV son for over a decade, called her America's favorite mother in his tribute that day. Richard "Rick" Correll. But here's what a lot of longtime fans genuinely don't expect. Richard Correll played Richard Rickover, Beaver's best friend during the show's final seasons. When acting slowed down, Correll didn't fade out. He flipped to the other side of the camera entirely, writing episodes of Happy Days, and eventually directing hundreds of episodes across sitcoms like Family Matters and That's So Raven. Before any of that, Correll had actually been acting since around age 8, appearing in more than 100 TV shows as a child, including The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet and National Velvet, long before Beaver made him recognizable. He worked his way up through the production side of the industry too, serving as associate producer on shows like Laverne and Shirley and the cult comedy Police Squad, before moving into directing full-time. Then, in the 2000s, he co-created a little Disney Channel show you might have heard of, Hannah Montana, helping launch Miley Cyrus's career the same way Leave It to Beaver. One slide to Beaver. Now in his late 70s, Correll is one of the show's clearest examples of a career second act eclipsing the first. Robert "Rusty" Stevens, Larry Mondello. Robert "Rusty" Stevens played Larry Mondello, the candy-loving best friend who talked Beaver into more trouble than anyone else on the show, stealing his mom's fair money, smoking his dad's pipe, you name it. Larry mysteriously vanished from the storyline partway through the run, and for years fans just assumed the worst. Some even spread rumors he'd died. The truth, according to Billingsley, was far less dramatic. Producers reportedly grew frustrated with pressure from his mother and quietly wrote him out. Born in 1948, Stevens picked up a handful of other roles right around that same time, including guest spots on Perry Mason, My Three Sons, and The Rifleman, before his career as a child actor wound down for good by 1963. According to at least one report, his family later moved to Philadelphia, and as recently as the year 2000, Stevens was reportedly working as a car insurance salesman in New Jersey. Stevens left Hollywood for a normal life, working for years in that kind of steady, ordinary job before Mathers eventually tracked him down for a 1980s reunion special. Now in his late 70s, Stevens keeps a famously low profile, but he's alive, and he's never lost touch with Mathers since. Quick gut check before we keep going. Of everyone on this list so far, who do you think has changed the most since 1963? Because the next few stories are about to complicate that answer. Tony Dow. This is the story we promised you at the start. Tony Dow played Wally Cleaver, Beaver's steady, popular older brother, arguably the most idolized teenager on 1950s television. Off-screen, Dow was a serious sculptor and, later, a television director in his own right. Dow actually wasn't the first choice for the role. He replaced a young actor named Paul Sullivan, who'd played Wally in the show's original, unaired pilot, before producers recast the part just before the series went to air. He also stepped away from acting for a few years in the late 1960s to serve in the U.S. National Guard, and later went on to direct episodes of shows like Swamp Thing and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the TV show. In 1987, the Young Artist Foundation honored him with its former Child Star Lifetime Achievement Award for the role that defined his career. In May 2022, Dow and his wife announced he'd been diagnosed with cancer. Then, on July 26th, his own management team posted that he had passed away, and the news spread everywhere. The problem: it wasn't true yet. Dow was still alive at home with his family. His son had to publicly correct the record. Tony Dow died the next morning, July 27, 2022, at age 77, from complications of liver cancer, surrounded by the people who loved him. Jerry Mathers, his TV brother of 65 years, wrote that Dow leaves an empty place in my heart that won't be filled. Stephen Talbot, after a story that heavy, here's one that might genuinely surprise you. Stephen Talbot played Gilbert Bates, the friend who was constantly luring Beaver into schemes he swore weren't his fault. Talbot walked away from acting as a teenager and went a completely different direction. Vietnam-era campus activism, then a decades-long career as an investigative journalist and documentary filmmaker for PBS's Frontline. Talbot is actually the son of veteran Hollywood, and he studied English and film at Wesleyan University, where he was deeply involved in anti-war protests during the late 1960s. His earliest documentaries, Broken Arrow, about nuclear weapons accidents, and The Case of Dashiell Hammett, both won George Foster Peabody Awards and set the tone for the rest of his career. From 2002 to 2008, he served as series editor of Frontline World, where he was tasked with expanding the show's global reporting and mentoring a new generation of journalists. He's won Emmy, Peabody, and DuPont awards for his reporting on subjects ranging from nuclear weapons accidents to American political campaigns. He once joked to producers trying to book him for a reunion, "I can't go back to being Gilbert." Now in his late 70s, Talbot is still working, and in 2025 he reunited on stage with several surviving castmates, including the actor we're about to meet. Frank Bank played Clarence "Lumpy" Rutherford, the show's lovable, dim-witted bully who terrorized Beaver, but somehow never lost the audience's affection. After the series ended, Bank made a decision that surprised everyone who knew him on screen. He became a stockbroker, and a genuinely good one. His real-life clients eventually included his own former castmates, Jerry Mathers and Barbara Billingsley. Billingsley once joked to People magazine that Bank was certainly brighter than Lumpy Rutherford. Born in Los Angeles on April 12, 1942, Bank had actually made his screen debut years before Beaver, with an uncredited role in the 1950 film Cargo to Cape Town, and by his own account he rarely ever He married 3 times over the course of his life and had 4 children, largely staying out of the public eye once he'd left acting behind for good. He reprised the role for 1980s reunion projects before stepping back from the spotlight for good. Bank died on April 13, 2013, one day after his 71st birthday, following a period of illness and hospitalization in Rancho Mirage, California. Mathers called him a character who always kept us laughing. But here's what most fans don't know about the actors we haven't covered yet. Two of the stories left